So today we have a rather unpleasant subject. It is failure. So I think that is something that we don't like to think about too much. Failures is not something pleasant. It is actually quite annoying most of the time and doesn't produce good feelings. All right, so who am I? My name is Ilari Henrik Aegerter. I work for eBay as well, so it's kind of two eBay people on the stage today. My role is I'm the manager of quality engineering Europe. That basically means that my team is testing all the features that eBay specifically makes for the European market. There are 12 sites that eBay hosts in Europe, and my team of 5 testers do the testing for these sites. Then I'm also the president of the International Society for Software Testing. That has been formed just very recently. It is reachable under commonsensetesting.org. Now, president sounds kind of impressive, but it is not so. All the board members are presidents, so we have 4 presidents. That is kind of that's our unique selling propositions. We are the org with 4 presidents. Good. So failure. So usually we really like to gloat about our successes and how well we did something. Today we're going to have a light on the exact opposite, on failures, and specifically on our personal failures, and I'm going to also reveal some of mine. Let's have one right away. The first failure, maybe you have noticed on the slides. So the entry slide was not really readable, it was too dark, but I can assure you it worked on my machine. So that's okay, so I came here. I'm a fairly frequent traveler, so this is, I think, my trip number 26 this year on an airplane. So I regard myself as being a seasoned traveler. So I come stone-faced to the check-in counter and do the check-in, and I'm the know-it-all because I'm traveling frequently. So I'm kind of I have this this posture of I know how to travel. So I checked in my luggage, and so the guy asked me whether or not I know what I need to do with the luggage in the US, and I say yeah, sure, no problem, I know that. And then you know that you need to pick it up before you fly to medicine. I said, what? Okay, I need to pick it up. Okay, thanks for letting me know. So I was kind of arrogant and telling the guy that I know exactly what I need to do, but actually I didn't. Then I just walked away, and I actually left my boarding cards at the desk, so I walked back, and so it's kind of, I think the guy at the check-in desk didn't think that I'm a seasoned traveler, so kind of my self-worth crumbled. A little failure, so but that's okay. So what is failure? One thing that I often do is that when I see something like the word failure, and as you know, I'm not an English speaker, I'm not a native English speaker, so I consult my good friend, the Oxford English Dictionary, and so what we can see here is lack of success, be unsuccessful in achieving something. So this is really not very cool. And actually, not achieving something can be both the via positiva, by doing something, or also the via negativa, by actually refraining from doing something. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a while. Quite nice to also have a look at other words. I think this doesn't convey a lot of happiness if you read this list of words. Fiasco, debacle, catastrophe, disaster, flop, washout, loser is cool. Collapse. So these are all words associated with failure, and we sometimes try to kind of not really go in there. But failure has also some good effects that we're going to talk about. Okay, so these are the more intellectual definitions and words and what is it. And the title of my talk is Author Failures and Lessons Remain Unlearned. And what better could there be to actually demonstrate failure? So I thought we should have a demonstration, and have you seen the fancy transition that I built into this slide? So I brought a very specialized tool that allows me to demonstrate failure to you, and actually very effectively demonstrate failure to you very fast. So this is a foot bag. So there are these very elegant people that kind of kick this ball, and it looks really cool and artistic and ballet-like how they juggle that. And now just have a look at my performance. Please don't fall. Okay, so I think if I went to a foot bag contest, that could probably be considered as a failure. maybe I would get some special points for being so utterly bad that it has some pleasurable influence on people. So, what would be the happy path? So, we do or we don't do something, it becomes a huge success, and the Nobel Prize Committee is on the phone for you. So, this would be considered as a success. Very nice, you get a prize, you get quite a lot of money, and everything works fine. And actually, I think pretty much everybody here is successful to some degree, and most of the time in your work, but there is also the failure. So that's not what usually happens. Many endeavors that you pursue are actually failing all the time. And we don't really like to talk about the failures in our lives. We'd rather bloat about our successes and how cool we are and kind of being a speaker at the conference and, you know, maybe failing up here. John told a story about the nervousness of speakers on the stage, and that is one of the dirty secrets. We're all nervous up here. We, to some degree, learn to handle it. So we're kind of failing when we go up to the stage because our hands are shaking. And the invention of this thing here is actually that it doesn't show your hands shaking. So that's kind of disguising the failure, the little failures that we all have. So now I'm going to ask a really stupid question now. So who, hands up, who has ever failed? Oh, that's pretty much everybody. So why don't we like to talk about failures? It feels unpleasant and uncomfortable, but it is sometimes okay to fail. It is this morning during the coffee break, I had quite a long talk with Pradeep Soundararajan from Amulia Testing, whose session unfortunately is at the same time as mine, so I can't be there. So he said the best way to recover from failure is to learn from it. Now this is kind of a very nice saying, but sometimes it's very, very difficult to know actually what you should learn from a failure. Sometimes it just doesn't show itself. You fail at something, you have no idea what you should do at that. And to learn something from it, I think that is the big art to handle failure. If you can do that, that's really cool. All right, so to fail, there are some paths. Mostly we think that we do something and we fail. So that's kind of the failure path we do. And so I here actually failed doing fancy transitions and nice diagrams with PowerPoint. I can do pretty well insertion of text and images in PowerPoint. That works very well. All the rest, kind of these transitions, that's hard work and a lot of swearing. And I don't feel comfortable when I do that. So I thought I'll revert just to a very manual process of kind of writing it down in a notebook and taking pictures. So let's assume we do something. So let's say you're a new tester and you try to learn some testing heuristics and try to apply them in your product. Then we have two possible outcomes. Now, the people of you who have been exposed to Jerry Weinberg a lot will have a cringe when they see the phrase "it works." So "it works" is, according to Jerry, the most ambiguous phrase in the English language. So what I mean by "it works" is the thing you do satisfies your own or somebody else's criteria for success to some degree. But I couldn't write that in my small notes book, so I just replaced it by "it works." But that's what I mean by "it works." And the opposite is, of course, it doesn't work. Now, this could be the easy thing that's all there is. But there is one more question to it. Is it okay that it works? So I think we should evaluate whenever we see something that looks like success, we should evaluate, is that actually fine? Is that okay that it works? And the same is if it doesn't work. We can ask ourselves, is it okay that it doesn't work? And see, there could be two answers to it. And so the failure are the two no's, of course. So I think sometimes when something doesn't work and it's not okay, that's a failure, and I think that's the usual part. But if something works and the answer to the question whether or not it is okay is actually no, then this could also be regarded as a failure. Now we have the via negativa. So this is more the path where we actually refrain from doing something. Let's say somebody falls on the streets and hits his or her head, and we don't help. So that is actually an inaction, and that could be also regarded as a failure. So again, is it okay? And if the answer to that is no, we can regard it as a failure. So we have these three different paths. And I guess the second one would be the usual one when we think about failure. So it doesn't work, and we're not satisfied with the outcome that something doesn't work. And for the first part, so do something, it works, and it's not okay. Let's say in my world and with my estimation, an example for that would be have all your testers certified. So that would be for me a failure. And that is actually a failure I went through. I was a manager at the medical device company, and I ran all my testers through the certification schemes, and I thought that's a good idea. I no longer do so. So that is maybe an example for that. And the second, let's say we try to learn programming and we don't get anywhere with it, then that would be regarded as a failure. And an example for the third one would be to shut up and not expose an ethically questionable behavior by somebody. Let's say I had a tester who kind of did not report the bug because somebody pressured them to not do that, and not taking any action in that case, I would regard that as a failure. Okay. With failures, I think we can separate them into three different sub-areas, kind of the personal, the corporate, and the community failures. So the personal failure, of course, that is whenever I'm involved and nobody else, so it's just me, I try to do something and I fail at it, so this only concerns me, it's my own actions and my own inactions that are concerned here. Now corporate, it could also be business. I didn't find a very good word for it, but this is everything in your work environment where you're acting in a group of a bigger corporation, or as an advisor or as a consultant. So whenever you do something in your professional life and it's a bigger group that is involved. Then also the community. I regard my community, the context-driven community that is assembled here at CAST. And so that is my community, and I think there are some failures in that area as well that I'd like to address. Now, personal failure, I'll give an example of what I once did. I was working for this medical device company, and I was a very fresh manager, so that was my first managerial job, and so I thought I really need to control everything and kind of expand my reach. And I actually tried to unify two different testing groups. There was a testing group that handled desktop software and another group that handled the embedded software. And so I thought, well, it would be a good idea if that came everything into my domain. So I was kind of greedy and tried to unify that. And I was really pressuring other managers until I really pissed them off. And actually, by every single action I did after that, I even more alienated these people. And so, of course, I was not successful in achieving that. And I think until today, it's still not unified. So I think even for my successor, this attempt of pressuring and putting a lot of pushy behavior upon people failed. So I regard that as a personal failure. I hope I have learned something from it, but I can't be sure, of course. One of the things that I have noticed at conferences in Switzerland, for instance, there is a very big conference called the Swiss Testing Day. It has 850 visitors, and they mainly come from Switzerland. So just imagine this tiny little country in Europe, Switzerland, and there is a testing conference with 850 people. I spoke to many people there, and they did not learn anything new. So they were just following their orders, they were taken, and I'm not sure why that is the case, to not be able or not be willing to learn something new. In my case, my background is not in software engineering. My background is sociology and general linguistics. So I have actually not a degree because I failed at continuing my studies at the university. I had to abort it for financial reasons, but that's okay. I'm over that. So I'm not a very good software developer. I did a kind of a 2-year course in software engineering, but I would regard myself a crappy software developer. And if I had to hire somebody in my team who needs to have very good software development skills, and that is often the case, I wouldn't be a candidate, so I would actually not fulfill my own criteria for that. But as a personal failure, I think not to learn something that would be helpful for the job is something that really bothers me with people. Not to work on relationships. with some people, I had discussions about their job in testing, and they are very proud testers, but they sometimes show a complete ignorance for the complexities of a software developer and their job. I think it is not a very well-advised idea to tell developers, well, why didn't you think about that? Look at this bug, you stupid, you didn't think about that. I think this shows a very arrogant behavior of people, and that's certainly not something good. I am guilty of that in my medical device company job as well. I said exactly that. So I went to a developer and I kind of laughed at him about a bug. And so in hindsight, I'm ashamed of that. This is not only concerning the relationship between developers and software testers, but between different communities. So I think the Agile community and the context-driven community, and I come to that a little bit later on, would be highly compatible to each other because they both think of themselves as being craftsmen and really trying to do some good things. But just having this wedge in between different groups, that is certainly never helpful, and that's not very nice. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's never, well, sometimes it's good to be an asshole if you don't care, but in the context of good collaboration with other people, it is not a very good idea. And the people among you who have gone through BBSD bug advocacy, you know that not every bug is worth fighting for. And just very recently in my job at eBay, there was a program called Nectar. Nectar is a value card for the UK, and there was a project in that, and I did some testing for the project, and I was really being pedantic about the bug. Oh, that really needs to be fixed, completely disregarding the timeline and the necessity to release very, very quickly. So I didn't evaluate the importance of that, but I just found, because I have found that bug, I should fight for it. So, and that was at the moment where I actually already knew that, you know, you don't have to fight for every bug. But I just got so much caught in that, that like, yeah, that's just what happened. So, possible reasons for personal failures. Here, I guess the reason is just bad choice. So, I don't think that there is another reason. Now here, failing at something, incompetence is certainly something that one should be aware of. If you're incompetent at doing something, so if you're not a software developer, it probably doesn't make sense if you attempt to build up a big automation suite for your company that checks a lot of facts in the software. Then lack of priority. What I hear a lot also on Twitter discussions is that, oh, I'm lacking of time. I don't have time for that. But actually, that's better to rephrase that as a lack of priority. I'm not really sure that it is like we have all the same amount of time. There is an abundance of time. There is all the time in the world. But prioritizing something makes us fail at different things. This is also an important driver to fail. So fear could lead to actually not even attempting to do something. Then that's kind of being unsuccessful and failing at the very beginning. So it doesn't even matter. You didn't even try. I have a lot of fears from many things. So for instance, I want to get better at understanding how software is developed. I'm wetting my pants about that because I think this is really a big endeavor. So fear is a very strong blocker for me in that area. Then procrastination, of course. I often have that when I have to prepare some kind of official documentation or official communication. I really don't like to do that. So this is kind of a temporary failure until I get my things together and still do it. Sometimes you also underestimate the effort. I think becoming a world-class tester needs a lot of time, and there are no shortcuts, especially not going through a multiple-choice questionnaire. That is not a shortcut to becoming a good tester. So underestimating effort is also one of them. Hallucination. We sometimes really think, well, we are really cool. I'm a cool guy. I can do that very, very good. I'm really good at doing something. But that is not the perception that is out in the world. It is just my own. And if the own perception was a little bit more reflected with some other people, then the hallucination would have been exposed. And then, just for the sake of completeness, one reason to fail utterly, completely would be the zombie apocalypse. I think that is a kind of a universal inducer of failure. So if that happens, and maybe we don't even know that it has already happened, so we don't know. Corporate failures. My experience in the testing world is I've worked for the medical device company and I now work for eBay. So I've worked for two very different companies, but there were some patterns that happened in both places, although testing a medical device, so that was a hearing instrument, that was not the same thing, and every procedure that we applied and the way we tested and the thoroughness and the release cycles, everything was different. So eBay is kind of a 180-degree different company. Still, what I noticed there is that many corporations, they don't develop as such a good understanding of what software testing is. And I'm really, really wondering of why all we smart people here have never achieved of changing that in big corporations. So at the hearing device company, it was more kind of, yes, you need to document everything. There need to be written test plans and you know, kind of 50 pages test plans and everything. And it's very important that it's got at a minimum of 50 pages. If it's less, it's not very nice. With eBay, there are other effects that it regards itself as a very strong engineering company, and that is also an important aspect of how testing is done at eBay, but that's certainly not all of it. So often these very strong opinions are expressed by development managers. I'm not sure how this came about, that development managers seem to have a very strong opinionated view on how things should be done. It's even worse for software development managers who have once been in testing in 1800 something, and so they know it all. And that is something I really don't know how to change that, and it has been like that for quite some time. Then just a quick question: who of you are actively involved in decision making in the hiring process of new testers? Okay, so quite a fair share. How many of you who are involved in that have the HR department heavily involved in the screening process? So are you satisfied with that, how that works? Okay, so, not really. What is the major reason for that?
We don't get them candidates.
You don't get candidates?
Yeah.
Okay.
They screen a lot of people out. That may not be the fault, but we're not getting a lot of candidates right now.
All right. Yes, in my career, when I was a fresh manager at the medical device company, I just took everybody who thought they can test. So I thought if they have the kind of the interest, so they could certainly learn that. And actually, I did never go through a systematic hiring process where I had people test a real product or kind of show and demonstrate their capability. So this is also one that I'm not sure if here in the US people can understand the pest of the certification scheme dealers, what influence they had in Europe, especially in the Germanic part of Europe, that is Switzerland, Austria and Germany. It is almost impossible to go through the screening process if you don't have this short abbreviation in your CV. You'll be just singled out. And there is this very strong belief that makes you a good tester. So the kind of infestation of the zombie certifications in Europe are really, really bad. So that's, for me, something that very much bothers me. Also, there's a primary work product. So we generate information, and often the focus is so much on the documentation side. So paper gives us this warm and fuzzy feeling of being a serious thing, especially if it's got a lot of chapters and a lot of pages. And if we have papers that state a kind of 100% coverage, then the only thing that it says is, well, we haven't found anything, but there is this misconception of taking the absence of evidence as evidence of absence. So thinking because we haven't found anything that the product works. Could it be that we don't speak up enough? So that is more a question. I'm not sure about that. Why are we not vocal enough to make ourselves heard in the corporate world? Why are so many Swiss banks and Swiss insurance companies working like robotic drones and not testing at all, but kind of making the ceremony of testing? And why is nobody speaking up about that? I see one of the problems also that we tend to not be connected to C-levels or decision makers in big companies. That there are certainly exceptions, but I think the great majority of us don't have a kind of a weekly chat with the CIO in a big corporation. Then in my estimation, in our community, I think not that many people are managers. How many here are line managers who have hiring and firing rights? Okay, a couple. So I think it could be very useful if there were more managers among us who actually take decisions. And yeah, then that's just the zombie apocalypse. That could also, that's kind of a universal reason for all failures. Okay, now this is the area I'm most passionate about, and I would very much like to have the open season discussing some of the points here. I think we as a context-driven community are failing on several levels, and that might be a bit painful, and maybe I don't make myself very popular by saying some things here, but let's see how that goes. So what do we have here? We have this nice family gathering. Many people here are kind of conference nomads, so we just travel from one conference to the other. And, you know, in the evening we have a couple of beers or kind of a dozen beers or 2 dozen. So it's just, you know, yeah.
Red wine.
Red wine, yes, that's for Robert Sabarin, it's red wine. For a lot of us, it's beer. So it is a gathering of friends. And we think that because we always meet and we have the very good understanding that we play a big role in testing. Now, I don't have any exact figures about the number of, let's say, context-driven, really skilled testers who play, who pay a lot of attention on their own education and really want to get better at testing. But my estimation is that it's about 300 to 400 people in the world. Maybe it's a little bit less than 1,000. Maybe it's less than 1,000. But let's say, for the sake of it, we have 1,000 skilled testers who really try hard to get better at their job and feel feel a lot of confidence in getting better at their job. So let's say it's 1,000 testers. Now just compare that to the about 250 to 300,000 certified testing drones that roam around in a half-dead state. So maybe this could be a kind of a Sparta moment, so where the minority of people suddenly start to influence the bigger part. At least in my view, and this would be interesting in the discussion as well, how you perceive that. Do we get bigger? Are there more testers jumping on that boat, or are we just staying this kind of 500 AST members, or you know, is that all there is? And compared to the hundreds of thousands of people out there who actually have tester in the job title and do some sort of appearance of testing, and so I think we're overestimating our importance in influencing how things go in the world. That might be a bit painful. So for those of you who are active on Twitter and kind of on the conferences, we tend to vouch for each other. So that's, you know, tester A tells that tester B is a good tester, but they have actually not seen tester B test ever. So I have heard many people telling that I'm a good tester, but they have never seen me testing. And actually, because I'm a manager, I'm certainly no longer the world-class tester. So I have somebody in my team, that's Ben Kelly over there, who I would regard as a world-class tester. I am certainly not, but if people give me this kind of peer credentials that I'm a good tester, I think we can do better than that and find out how we can actually say that tester A is a good tester. And it's certainly not being highly active on Twitter and on speaking at conferences that makes people good testers. So we should be a bit more careful. That's, again, my opinion. We should be more careful in telling somebody's a good tester and base that on some good evidence. It goes in the same line. I am a good puzzle solver, so I'm good at that. I was always good at that. I enjoyed doing puzzles, so I had talks with James Bach, and then I'm good at puzzles, so that's something that I like to do. But a good puzzle solver doesn't necessarily make you a good tester. I don't see we take A as evidence for B. I'm not sure where the link to that is to be very good at at the dice games and being a good tester. There's certainly a link, but it doesn't show and doesn't demonstrate how somebody is a good tester. Here again, I think we as a community, the context-driven community, we have not built good relations to C-levels. Very luckily, there is Keith Klein now, who himself is very high up in the hierarchy. I think we as a community have failed at building these relationships to the decision makers. And maybe that's not possible because we're just a couple of hundred people and there's so much out there that we're completely outnumbered. But that's maybe something to think about. This is a personal pain to me. So we allow worthless certification scheme dealers as sponsors of some of our conferences. I think this is a failure on the leadership side. I don't see how at the hippie peace convent you would invite the National Rifle Association to be a sponsor. You don't have any meat packing companies at vegetarian conferences. So I think that is a big failure in our community. And I don't know if the outrage of that is as strong as in Europe, but among us European testers, that is certainly one of the points that produces a lot of head shaking and disbelief. And I fail to understand how that is. And the reasons I got, I don't quite get why they should be in the way of not allowing them to be here. So that is something, it bothers me personally, and I regard it as a failure. So in our community, I think we have a lack of leadership. Although we have a lot of leaders, but aren't these leaders more directed inwardly, more into the sphere of ourselves? So how could we produce leaders that become more influential outside of our own little club here called context-driven testers? Then again, it's hallucination. Maybe we just like how we do testing, so we really feel good. So it's a hallucination of the importance that we have. Maybe we're just hallucinating again. Then in the kind of the peer, giving credentials to people, I think the evidence there is not the right thing, and we should maybe think a bit more about how we can collect good evidence about a good tester. And we're not lobbying enough. That's not the cool thing. So you can probably guess what comes last. So zombie apocalypse could also be one of the reasons. I'm going to reuse that for many things. I think that is always a good reason. So I have a couple of questions that really bother me most. So there are actually two questions that bother me most, and how to find a solution for things that I perceive we have failed so far. So the first one of that is, how can we effectively influence decision makers to A, develop a sound understanding of testing, and B, hire testers accordingly? So that is one of the questions, and I'd like to have the open season to discuss these questions, but of course you're completely free to attack me on any other subject. And the second one is, how do we massively grow this community to become the reference of how excellent testing is done? So I have not perceived as this community growing a lot. It has grown gradually, but if we want to become important in how testing is done, the growth should be much faster and bigger. So just growing a couple of hundred more testers each year doesn't help at all to be a counterpoint to the drones in testing. All right, so let's make sure that we don't end up in situations like this, and I will finish my talk right now and actually open season a little bit earlier. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Loken. I've been thinking a lot about the certification versus context dynamic there and industry dynamics in general, and it feels to me like a big part of the certification side is wanting to make cookie cutter workers that can be easily replaced, swapped in, swapped out. You want automation, you want cheap workers. It's the same reason we send a lot of work overseas. They want bang for their buck. Whereas to me, the context-driven feels like a more artisanal community. There are people that care about what they do and want to be experts and leaders in their field. And that feels like a huge part of the dynamic I haven't heard anyone talking about that. So I was interested if you had heard anything about that or thought about it at all in regards to that dynamic.
So the dynamic, if I understand your question correctly, Jeff, is that the industry has taken a model from the 19th century, which is the factory work, so conveyor belts, where you pack tomato soups. And so you can quantify that, you can have all the SMART goals applied to them, so 500 cans, and then you're done. I think if the model that hovers above everything in software testing is the one of the factory or the conveyor belt or the kind of the meat packing person at the conveyor belt, as long as this model is taken as how the decisions are made, this won't change. But I completely agree with you. It is certainly more like the artisan spectrum of people, or it is knowledge workers. So we work with our brains, and it's very difficult to kind of have that replicated or have kind of testing drones produced by a standardized process. And I think this image or the model that underlies that thinking should be changed. Otherwise, I think that the arguments just don't, it doesn't fall on fruitful ground, because the kind of the premises people base their decisions on are so fundamentally different that it is no use to tell people, well, this certification isn't okay. Then the question would be, okay, which certification then would be okay? I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Oh, that's great. Thanks.
Okay.
Where's 51?
It seems really easy to say that a certain thing is bad or wrong for the industry.
Agree.
It's much harder to help us understand what's good, especially, I suppose, in respect to the comments about what makes a good or a bad tester and how do we display evidence of that. I guess my question is, in the absence of a way to do that, people fill the vacuum, including organizations, probably like the certification organizations that you mentioned. What can we do, aside from saying that they're bad, to give managers and corporations what they need to hire good testers and understand what makes a good tester?
All right. One path I would see, but maybe that is out of la-la land and kind of wishful thinking, but if all this room here became a CIO at companies and have this sound testing background, that would certainly help. So let's have Keith replicated a couple of times and kind of have him spread into other companies and influence the way how testing is seen. But I completely agree. It's now my talk is an easy one because I'm just pointing to problems and to failures and not coming up with solutions. But that would be the interesting thing to have this discussion here. A lot of smart people that might have ideas on how to do that. But as I said, some things are not very easy. So it is the certification schemes they're absolutely frauds because when they flew to the moon, that was not a paper rocket kind of made out of cheap material. So that was really a very sophisticated thing to do. And the kind of the misconception that just by filling it into a multiple choice questionnaire that you demonstrate mastery, that is so wrong on so many levels that it is painful. But I don't have a good solution to that, except that more testers in this community should pursue a managerial career and while doing that, not forget the roots they come from. So maybe that is also an effect that some people were very good testers and then they climbed the corporate ladders and now they have become drones themselves. I don't know. Maybe Keith can say, is Keith here? No, Keith is not here. Okay.
I just wanted to follow it up, not by putting you on the spot, and I appreciate your answer, and that it's not that this problem is necessarily unique to testing. We see, including in software development, right, amongst programmers, there's certification for specific languages and things like that as well. I find it peculiar, however, why the industry in general seems to gravitate towards certification for software testing when I don't see that same type of challenge with respect to the other side of the software development equation with programmers. I don't have an answer for that, but I think it's curious that exists in our industry or our role and not in programming.
Well, adding to that, I think evaluating quality the right way would involve a lot of work and wouldn't be comparable to other organizations. Now, I think we humans, we have a weakness for quantified data. So we really like a number like 51.37%. That sounds scientific and exact and very accurate. And we'd rather have that than actually evaluating it qualitatively. I think in many corporations, if you look at it, most of the corporations, they have some sort of management by objectives system in place where people are evaluated quantitatively on their performance. I see performance much better measured by having it described qualitatively and not quantitatively, especially since the quantification of what really creates value as a tester it is almost impossible. You cannot put that into a single number and derive from that quality. On the other hand, I think that many decision makers just meet each other at the golf course in the same way as we meet at CAST, and then they ask, what do you do? And they say, one CEO tells, well, we have these certification schemes that we apply to our testers. And then the CEO B will adapt to that just for the sole reason of not doing something else. And if it's not good, then he's at least not the only one. But this is a quite disrespectful view of it, but might have some truth in it.
Yeah, so going back to the certification topic, it seems like the challenge to really change the thought process regarding that is to really promote and take advantage of experiential opportunities like CAST and other testing opportunity. I mean, there are any number of opportunities out there, but to, as a tester, take advantage of those, and then as a leader or a manager, really promote those to the different teams out there. So, I mean, that seems like an obvious solution to kind of steering that ship away from that standard cookie cutter education.
I would agree with you. It's a little story about my recent attempt to hire somebody. I placed a job ad on LinkedIn, and I stated in the job ad that I mentioned context-driven in the ad, and I described how I would, what kind of person I look for. I got about, I don't know how much it was, I think about 5% of the applications that came in had on the top right of the CV a logo that kind of creates a weird feeling with me. So they had the certification as a header on their CVs. So there was a complete disregard for what I'm looking for. So I couldn't make myself understood with a certain percentage of people. Somehow these organizations have been so successful in conveying the image that this is useful, that it is ingrained in even the applicants for a job, that they completely disregard what type of person is looked for. I don't understand how that is possible. The only reason for that would be that their marketing is excellent. So that's probably the thing. They're really good at that, and they also provide a very, very simple solution to a complex problem, and there are too many people who jump on that. John.
So, a solution for you to consider, and I say this as being probably one of even a smaller handful of people that cross back and forth between the various communities and schools, which I do, is opposed to sitting here saying semi-inflammatory statements of drones and things like that, which in some cases I don't totally disagree with, but it's counterproductive in the sense that if you want to change something, a opportunity exists to go change it from the inside. And which is why I participate in a lot of these other communities, even though a lot of what they say and do, sometimes I disagree with. But creating separate, parallel communities of ever smaller sizes may not get you what you're looking for. And to work and change things from the inside turns out to be rather hard, by the way, because as I move around, everybody seems to think that I'm from somewhere else, is the way I would kind of describe it. And when you're here in this community, yeah, everybody context-driven, so, you know, it's a big, you know, kind of agreement on basic principles. You know, trying to change ISTQB, evolve it towards something that is more tolerable, get the understanding of what it really means to take and pass a 100 question multiple choice test is roughly the equivalent of you know, saying I'm a psychiatrist after I pass introductory level in college of 100 questions. That's ludicrous. You know, nobody in the other fields, I think, would believe that. So I think we, as much as anything, need to work to change those other communities and bring some common sense to them. And is that something you'd be willing to do? I mean,
no. Let me say why.
You're part of the problem then. As far as
No.
I'm concerned.
The no applies to your suggestion to change the organization from inside. Now I have an anarchistic strain in myself, kind of not really believing in what's happening there and the kind of the sound motivations of people. I believe that the certification schemes, they're just making a shitload of money of what they're doing, and that is a business model that seems to work. Why would they want to undermine that very, very beautiful business model of generating a lot of money for their own consultants and course providers? Why would they do that? So it's not every single group that I disagree with. I would also kind of try to change it from the inside. I believe every hope is lost in that area. I don't think it is possible to change from the inside. But again, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is the truth. That is my impression that I have. And I think every one of us has to decide on where to put the energy in. I see the effort needed to actually change that from the inside with that business model in place at the moment as completely a lost cause. That's why I wouldn't want to change it from the inside. Where I see more success is kind of working in corporations or being a consultant to other corporations and actually trying to change the perception in single corporations instead of trying to change a big organization that is very powerful and have a very strong marketing apparatus in place. I see that as a lost cause. So that's the reason why I don't want, my answer to that is no.
So if you consider this a new topic, I'll pull myself off the stack. But basically my question regarding certification is that there seems to be in some professions a very rigorous certification process. For example, doctors, lawyers, right? Those are actually very significant exams that indicate at least sort of a basic level of advanced competency. Is if there were an organization that were able to create sort of something that really goes deeper than that test you can study for in 2 or 3 days, is that something that you would think might be something that the context-driven community could get behind?
So, very glad you mentioned the medical profession. So doctors, they go through university studies and then they're kind of certified doctors. That's when the education actually starts. That's why I don't know how it works in the US, but in Switzerland, they will work kind of night shifts for the first 10 years and they're supervised like crazy. And that's when they get the real skill. That's when they master of becoming a good doctor. So nobody fresh from university will open an own a practitioner's office and have their own hospital, but they will actually go through a side-by-side working with very experienced people. So this is it's a kind of an apprenticeship model. So doctors become doctors because they go through a very long and thorough apprenticeship model after they have gone through the basic understanding of what all these Latin expressions mean. So that's how they learn that. And then also, just because certifications work in one domain, that doesn't mean that they automatically work in another domain. So I don't think that just because you can, let's say, you can certify a kind of a shipping container for its usefulness. I don't think just because that is certifiable that the testing profession is also certifiable by itself. I don't think that you become a good tester by just answering a couple of questions in a multiple choice questionnaire. Let's have a domain that is much closer to us, so software developers. Just imagine a software developer went through a 50-question multiple choice questionnaire where they ask what is a class, and then you have kind of some weird answer and something that makes sense, and by crossing the right box, they will employ to develop the software for, let's say, the Mars mobile lander. So that just sounds ridiculous. And why doesn't it sound ridiculous on the testing profession as well? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to show that we are actually highly
Cool.
live online, there's a question on the thread. Please read it.
Oh, okay. So I'll read the question. It's by 123 test. Oh no. So, can you clarify about not being able to change from the inside? Is that just with regard to the certification groups? Well, I'm not sure if every certification group couldn't be changed from the inside. So I was very much referring to the certification group that has a booth here at this conference. So I don't think that this certification group is changeable from the inside. I really don't believe in that. But again, this is not truth, this is my opinion. And I think I stated my opinions before. Thank you, Internet, for the question.
So I think that it's worth noting that doctors have a rigorous certification and education process because they can very easily kill people.
So can software.
Right, not on a daily basis. Hopefully.
Especially untested software, yes.
Yeah.
A pacemaker that kind of gives the patient an electric current, kills the patient.
It's true, it can happen. The vast majority of software that I've worked with, that's not really a consequence of most of it. What level of competence do you think is necessary for a tester in this? Given that, there was a comparison to a doctor there, and a doctor has basically somebody's life in their hands on a daily basis. I don't. What do you think is necessary?
What skill level is? Did I understand correctly? What skill
level
level?
Of competence? Yeah.
Well, I think if you just developed a little throwaway piece of software that is used once, probably the skill level of a tester needs to be 0 because it's not even tested. If you're developing a kind of a software for a Mars station where people will live, the standard will be certainly much higher. So I can't give a kind of a generic answer to that. That it's kind of impossible because software is almost everywhere. So it really depends on what kind of software you're referring to. So maybe you can specify.
I don't know
Yeah.
that I could yet. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's going to be useful.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, we got quite a lot of things coming in on this thread, but we also have a lot of new topics. So I'm thinking we suspending this thread and check some new topics and see if we have time to come back. Okay? So 95.
That's 95.
Okay.
Hi. Wanted to go back to a completely different subject, actually. I was just a cautionary note, especially as it refers to personal failures, although I suppose it can be expanded to others as well. There's a good book that I've been reading recently called The Design of Everyday Things. And it brings up an interesting psychological point that a lot of times what we can actually perceive as personal failures are in fact a problem with the design of the system or the process that we're working with. So we always have to keep that in mind as a caution, and I didn't know if you had any additional feedback on that as well.
I have an example to that. My PowerPoint skills, since it has changed to the ribbon, I just can't be bothered to do it. So I fail at it. But maybe it's a design issue. I'm not sure if that's the case. Another example is kind of VCR, kind of DVD programming, programmable DVD players or something like that, where you have a very confusing set of buttons that you would have to read through the documentation a lot. Maybe that is just not intuitively clear, and so the failure there is maybe more on the usability side. So certainly usability issues can induce failure, especially in operating with devices. Agree.
Okay, new topic in the front, 154.
Thank you. I'm not sure I agree that we need to expand the community very quickly. I think it's more important to have a very influential core that keeps to it. It will gradually expand. What I've seen at home in Sweden, where context-driven has caught on fairly good, is that small communities with very passionate testers kind of tends to draw new people. So it's important to support that core, and the rest comes quite naturally. Just forcing and trying to create, to expand the community, I'm a bit afraid that would undermine our credibility in a sense. If we start to work too hard to just marketing the idea rather than just continue being skillful practitioners. Is that something you can relate to or believe in, or is it?
Well, I think this community has some very charismatic leaders. So there are people that are really good at arguing, they're really influential and have influenced many among us as well. Now, how is that helpful if we're preaching to the choir? If we're just kind of, having our own, I was almost saying masturbation session, but I'm not going to do that. So if we just have that. Yeah.
Okay, maybe to rephrase, maybe at home we have a lot of small communities that simply influence people from the grassroots, basically, and I feel that is more important. And in that case, I think the core is more important rather than just reaching out to everyone and trying to praise how to do software testing. I can't see how that has helped as much as just trying to be good role models and see how people get influenced by us.
Okay.
So I'm more against the preaching part and more for being a role model in general.
Well, I think there are two things. There are, in spreading the context-driven idea and kind of the skill testing ideas, there are two areas of action. One is testers themselves who actually do the job, but then it's also on the understanding side. So if we get more CIOs aboard that completely get the idea of context-driven and think that this is a very good approach to do testing and actually influence their own corporations in only looking for these people. So if there was more work done on the demand side of testing, that is where it would be helpful. Not every single one has to become a context-driven tester, But if more people understood the value of it and understood that this would probably be a sounder approach to testing than just kind of having people execute test cases. So I think that would be helpful. So I'm not saying that this community should grow in testers exponentially. That would certainly also be helpful, but I think we should work on both sides.
Hi, thank you. I think this is an interesting thread, and I don't know if it's going to be a long thread, but it does beg the question, how can we proceed? And I always like to suggest to people let's take a look at past failures to try to learn from them. And the person that I think we need to really advance the cause and really make a difference is the parallel, and this is not a religious statement, of Constantine, the emperor. Now, Constantine in 400 converted to Christianity and converted officially the whole Roman Empire to Christianity, which suddenly skyrocketed the popularity of that religion in that part of the world. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. I don't want to judge that. But for 400 years prior to that, there was a small group of people that just kept to their values and kept going, but couldn't influence change until one big, very important guy got it and said, hey, this is a good way to go, and then advocated it and made it happen. The allusion you made in your talk to members in the board having influence at that level is a step in that direction. Whether that influence is only one company or others, I don't know. I do know there's an irony, because if you counted 300 testers and you look at the number that this person is supposed to influence is significantly more than 300, you're going to triple the community with that one.
Yes.
That one advocate. That's where you start getting exponential growth. I think the worst thing we can do, and I'm not trying to pontificate here, but I'm afraid that we do something really stupid and take a good core, which has got honor and ethics, and do something really, really stupid, which everyone's from then on going to say, aha, there's the group that did that stupid thing. You don't want to be like them. And that's just it. It's pontification. I would love your feedback on that.
Well, as said, there's Keith Klein in the community. So Keith Klein, I think he has heavily influenced how testing is done in his corporation. Of course, he has not changed every single one of, I think he's got 850 testers into the right course. That is not possible, and it's not happening within kind of 20 minutes just because somebody finds that a good idea. But I very much hope that people who have reached a certain level in organizations and advocate for good testing also play golf. So that is would be very, very helpful to have these kind of golf course talks. Now, just the interesting thing is I'm completely ignorant. I've never played golf. This is just kind of my image I have, and I like this model. I like the model. I'm not sure if there's any truth in it, but I still believe that's kind of the transportation of new ideas is often happening on golf courses. About the screwing up, well, can you give me an example how we would screw up? Kind of alienate everybody?
Someone goes and makes a statement in front of the community suggesting that one of the sponsors of the conference shouldn't be here.
Yes.
that organization, just for fun, let's say, decides to sue us, and that makes the headlines of CNN for months saying, ha ha ha, their sponsor sued them and they have no money and they're dead. Like a silly mistake like that.
Well, it's of course it's a good idea to try to yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, it's Robert Sabarin just mentioned that some very strong opinion leaders in the community kind of make a stupid comment on something that suddenly becomes a law case in. Yes, so there's certainly the danger to that. My perception is that mostly these people are both intelligent and passionate, and so the passionate can sometimes overrule the intelligence part. So there's certainly the danger for that. I think we should just be courageous and kind of always keep that in mind. But I don't have you can hear with my rambling. I don't have a good answer to your question. Yeah.
So I was really interested in answering your second question, and we've touched upon the topic briefly. And it's how we massively grow this community without losing some of its quality. And I think having graduated from a computer science degree at, I'll do some name dropping here because it'll make Robert happy, McGill University in Montreal, where Robert is an adjunct professor. My biggest regret right now is not having taken his software validation course. Now, the problem with that is it wasn't offered to my program. I think what we really need to start looking into as a community is influencing those thought leaders, computer science degrees or even technical degrees, to start offering these software validation, software testing programs where the thinking process is expressed as the ultimate value versus just the checking.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got an industry, like Montreal has a gaming industry that all they do is checking. They have legions of testers, they go through checklists, and they have a few testers. I think we need to, develop at the university, at the scholastic level, are pretty much our values and our thought processes. What are your thoughts on that?
I see one of the difficulties of establishing that. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I see one of the difficulties in kind of computer engineering, in software engineering classes, that they are very much engineering focused, which means exact thinking and going through exact stuff. And software testing has a lot to do with social sciences. And so there is this deep divide between the social and the so-called exact sciences. And since software testing involves a lot of asking good questions, arguing, building relationships, kind of taking the standpoint of a user, not believing something, applying heuristics, all this kind of a little bit fuzzy thing that might create some unease with engineering students because it's not very exact. There's not a calculation behind it, but it's based on heuristic. I think that is one of the major, I don't know if it's major difficulties. I perceive that as being a difficulty in including the more social side of software testing in engineering classes. But I would agree that this would be certainly helpful to be included in the university courses in software engineering. Sure.
Okay, so just going to recap, we have about 7 minutes left. We have one comment on this thread. We have 4. You have to hear. Okay, we have about now 6.5 minutes left. And one comment on this thread. We have a completely unfinished thread, and we have 4 new topics, 84, 60, 154, and 112, if you're still on as new topics. So if we can speed up, short now.
So follow up on the last comment and also what you said. First off, heuristics are from engineering. Good engineering schools understand the soft side of things, and it isn't just all black and white. Also, I think working to change, call it the foundational education coming out of college and things like that is an excellent idea, partially because I've been already doing that for a lot of years. What you have to do that is change things like the Software Engineering Book of Knowledge and some of the IEEE stuff, which are only slightly better maybe than ISTQB land. So again, I go back to there's things in play already that this community has to look at changing is the recommendation I'm making out there. And always happy to have cohorts help.
In my experience talking to software engineers, whenever I use the word heuristics, that kind of created a blank stare and kind of what's this Greek stuff going on. So I'm not so sure if that is kind of specifically for the US part of engineering. It's in Europe, to the people I talk to, don't tend to have a sound idea on what that could be.
I was referring to engineering in general.
Oh, okay, sorry, misunderstood you. Yeah.
Not necessarily in particular.
Okay, new topic 60?
Or 60.
60's off the stack.
60 off the stack from 84? Okay.
Don't all beg off at once.
Are you okay?
I'm okay. There's no
Good.
blood.
Does it work?
What does that mean in this context?
During Let's Test recently, a very reoccurring theme was for testers to become better at speaking business, or as Scott Barber put it, business language.
Very good value proposition you're bringing here.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, you already mentioned it a bit, I think. The certification business is a lot better at using business language to promote their ideas. Do you think we would benefit from becoming better at expressing things in business, or is it just a language which we can't really translate our ideas into as good, since it's often a lot of values and those kind of things?
I think it would be very helpful. I recommend you to talk to Scott Barber. He has talked about that as well. So I think, that was at Let's Test when he talked about that. It would certainly help if some people got better at kind of translating the ideas into another language. So that's a usual process. If an English speaker wants to speak to a Swiss person, if that person doesn't speak English, then it's better to translate it into that language. Certainly would be helpful. Agree.
So just to clarify, you think the two languages are compatible, that we could express our own craft and ideas in a language understandable from a business point of view? Is that correct?
Well, being a linguist, whenever there is a translation from one language to another, something gets lost, and what gets lost might be the very crucial thing. So the honest answer to that is I don't know.
Good. And I just got confirmed. Sorry, I just got confirmed that we are out of new topics, so we actually have some time. We have a couple of minutes to go back to our suspended thread.
The internet got any questions? No?
Yeah, actually they are in that one. But we'll give it to 63 first, if you can remember the thread.
Well, actually, this involves multiple threads. The company that I work for is Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and we actually did land the rover on Mars.
Oh, very cool. Welcome.
And so my comment is that we don't care that testers have certification. We don't care that they have experience. What we care about is that they understand the application. You have to be able to test the software. You have to understand the spacecraft. You have to understand a lot about your application. I think, this is my personal opinion, that if you want to change the community, that you can do it individually, one at a time, by understanding the application, understanding what the software people are doing. I was in an earlier talk where they talked about pairing with the software people. I think that you can be evangelist in that way, and therefore change the community one person at a time, and become an advocate for whatever group you're talking about.
I fully support your path. I think it is it's probably the best way to influence people, to have somebody pair up with a person who is very experienced in what they're doing. That is certainly a very thorough and nice path. I'm unfortunately not very, I would like to speed up that process a bit more, but I fully agree with you that that's probably the best way to convey ideas to somebody else. I very much believe in the apprenticeship model.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very short, 126, same thread. You off. Okay, 6, same thread. About 25 seconds max.
Okay, I'll be very brief then. To the topic of what's going to change the industry, I'm new to the software testing industry. I'm a licensed civil engineer. But I think the best way to do it is by making a case to the decision makers to, if everyone here set up a lunch with their boss next week and tried to sell the case that context-driven and exploratory testing is important, and more than that, it'll save the company money in the long run. If you can make the case that there's a financial benefit, that's how it's going to grow, and not try to do an either or of the drone type low-level testing versus exploratory and context-driven testing, but that this is an added benefit to the company.
Yes, I agree. So I have your word that you're going to do that next week?
Well, I can, because I work at a like 12-person company, so I can go to lunch with the owner of the company whenever I want. So
okay.
I'm not the test sample for that.
Okay.
But just to get the word out there, you know, because like people have said, you can say the same stuff around and around in this group, and while that's great, it doesn't help expand the ideas. We need to bring the ideas to new people.
Yes, I agree. Just not talk only within our country club, but talk to other people as well. Agree. Thank you.
Good.